Welcome, weary traveler. It's time for the Book Corner with me, Misha Tagana, the podcast where we discuss all things books, and more books. Sometimes I throw in some travel stuff in there where I'm reading a book, maybe some tea or wine, what I'm drinking when I'm reading this book. But let's get into it and talk about today's book. Hey, we are back again. Welcome back to the Book Corner with myself, Mesha Tagana. Those of you who are returning guests, thank you for coming through again. I really appreciate it. For those of you that this is your first time, well, thank you. And I really hope you enjoy this podcast. So, today we're going to get a little cozy. So, if you want to pull up somewhere nice and cozy, grab a little drink of something. I've got some tea. So I'm going to take a little sip of my tea. Mm, love tea. I'm a huge fan of tea. And this is interesting, me being a fan of tea and the conversation we're about to have. So we are going to talk about Legends and Latte, a cozy fantasy book. Guys, I cannot believe I read fantasy for so long. I didn't know there was such like a subgenre called cozy fantasy. Did everybody know about cozy fantasies but me? But even when this was described to me, I remember going, what does cozy fantasy mean? So I discovered this book, Legends and Latte by Travis Baldree. It was recommended to me by another author who I'm definitely going to talk about his book on this podcast at some point. Ilan Mastai, shout out Ilan. So he recommended this book to me because I said to him, all I want to do for this year is just read fantasy books, right? And he was like, well, if you like fantasy, you're gonna like this book. You should read this book. I was like, okay, sure. Let me go check this book out. So Elan, also an author, he wrote a book called All Our Wrong Todays, which is really, really great. It's about time travel. But like I said, I want to talk about it in a podcast, but I'm hoping I'm gonna talk about it with a friend of mine who recommended it to me. So yeah, so Elon recommends this book, Cozy Fantasy. I pick it up. I'm like, okay, I wonder what this is gonna be. I was in Toronto at the time, and then I was like, okay, let's see what a cozy fantasy is. The way he pitched it to me is like it's about an orc who starts a coffee shop. Now, I'm holding a copy of the book in my hand, right? And the back of it reads, she's done slaying monsters. She's ready to serve coffee. After decades of adventuring, Viv the orc barbarian is hanging up her sword for good. Now she sets her sights on on a new dream, sorry, opening the first coffee shop in Thune. Even though no one there knows what coffee actually is. So this for me is kind of like the whole crux of the story, right? So Viv, a lovable orc, has decided the life of barbarianing and, you know, slaying monsters and being a sword for hire, that life is done. She doesn't want to do that anymore. She just wants to make some coffee. And for me, I was just like, wait, what? What do you mean she wants to make coffee? So we are literally transported into this world. It's a world full of, fantastical creatures. It is a full-on high fantasy world. But as the tag for the book goes, high fantasy, low stakes, good company. It really is this world of all these different creatures. So you've got an orc, you've got a succubus, you've got a ratkin, you've got humans, you've got elves, you've got all these creatures, and they're all coming together in this amazing little coffee shop that this orc decided she wants to start. Um, One of my favorite things is when the book starts and she's gotten this location and she's trying to build this coffee shop. So she gets the help of this guy who is a great contractor. He works in the docks, and she believes, he can help her build the kind of coffee shop she wants based on something she saw in another bigger city because she discovers coffee just walking in a big city, right? And the smell of coffee just caught her, so she followed her nose, goes into this coffee shop, orders a drink, takes a sip, and her life is transformed, right? Which is really, really interesting. As a former heavy drinker of coffee, I know that feeling when you kind of have that amazing first sip of coffee, especially if it's in the morning or it's your first cup of the day, and the world just feels just right, and that taste just tingles in your tongue, and your mind decides it's time to wire itself to where it needs to be. So I could definitely understand how coffee could be like a spiritual moment for her. But yeah, so she hires this guy who's going to help her build this coffee shop of hers. And he kind of says to her, "So, what exactly is coffee?" And then she explains it. And then she goes, "Okay, this is what it's made of." So she explains it's made of beans and things like that, like coffee beans are. And he says to her, "Right." And then it's like, and then there are lattes. And he goes, "What's a latte?" It's like, coffee but with milk. And then, but he calls it like bean water. And so throughout the book, something he keeps going is bean water. And I really just like the way these characters come together to help her achieve this dream. So she had this weird neighbor who's like, "What are you doing? I don't know. I don't trust this thing. What is this coffee business?" She has her ex comrades who are this people she's been barbarianing with in the world, who literally like, "What is this weird thing you've left us to do?" They did this one job, their one last job, and at that last job, there's a secret score that she got. So she's got this thing which the others don't know that she kind of took from the job, but it wasn't like she stole it. It's one of those things where it's not a thing that she stole, but it's a thing she omitted to tell them that she took from the job. And one of the people from the job knows about it. Now he's trying to cause trouble for her. Then there are the people who are like the quote unquote big boys of the town, or the thugs of the town, or whatever you want to call them, of the town of Thune. And they want her to kind of, almost pay like a safety fee, and she doesn't want to do it. So it's like this whole starting a new business, the different obstacles that gets in the way of your new business. Guys, if you're an entrepreneur and you want to start a business, I think you should read this book, by the way. I know it's like a little cozy fantasy book, but it's kind of interesting, just the different ways she thinks about starting a business and how this coffee shop evolves, right? So it's in the way I've described it as a cozy fantasy. It's one of those books where you just feel warm and fuzzy when you read it, right? The writing is just it's easy, and there's no the adventure is low key, but you're interested. You want to know, is Viv gonna succeed? Are people gonna like coffee? What are they how is she going to pitch this to them, she meets the succubus, and she hires the succubus, and they're like, "Okay, so she's opened this coffee shop." So the succubus goes, "But how are people gonna come?" And then she's like, "Well, I suppose they'll just show up." And she's like, "No, maybe we should put out signs to tell them to come." And you kind of watch the way they discover marketing and how to market a product, right? And then they have like this marketing campaign, and it brings people in. And then there's this rat like creature who comes in, and he's like obsessed with coffee. Like, to be honest, I think that guy should be caught up. Like, he drank so much coffee. And they just like all like begin the adventure in this coffee space. The succubus has an ex or some dude that is a bit problematic. There's a guy who comes in and he asks if he can play music in there. As they go on, you know, they start to think of other things they can add to their menu that people want. So they begin to add pastries. Now they have a music night. It's literally, you just read it and you kind of look at every coffee shop you've ever been to, if you saw it from conceptualization, if that's what it feels like. So if your coffee shop, the first person who came up with the idea of a coffee shop, how they created their menu, how they decided to advertise, the way they described things, the way, they added things to the menu, what made sense, like I always think of this book like the idea of building a business in a strange town, or building or starting over after you've had a very specific kind of life and you're trying to change, is possibly one of the scariest things. And this character who is literally this badass barbarian. Like, she's an orc. She's a badass barbarian. She has a sword that has done damage to people, in the past. And here she is in this sweet little place trying to build a life, explaining to people what the strange beverages that they've never seen before is, how to consume it, the different ways in which, they want to, like, the different ways in which they want to connect with each other while they're there, the invention of a different kind of music. Like, this guy pretty much comes to invent like bass guitar in some ways. um but I really thought that, for a story that is set in a high fantasy world, we usually is full of betrayal. It's full of, like, angst and a big time adventure, a quest for something big, death, war, like, bloodbath, all of that stuff. But here we have the same world, and we are seeing it at its most gentle, moments, where even the part where the biggest conflict comes through, it is not solved with the sword. It's solved with conversation, and some pastries. It's solved with people having believing in each other and having each other's back. And there's a whole theme here about the power of friendship, and how, through coffee and through coffee and through, really delicious pastries. I mean, the way they describe those pastries in the book, I wanna get some of those pastries, right? Like, I feel like, for me, I want to see more fantasies like this, where we're in these badass worlds with this insane mythical creatures, but we're also seeing the gentle, beautiful moments of those worlds. Like, when I was done reading, I actually posted on my Instagram stories. So those of you that follow me on Instagram, you would have seen this. Like, I actually said, I think the way I described it was, just completed this delightful, cozy fantasy. It is low stakes, easy read about discovering coffee and true friendship. And for me, I think that's really so critical. Like, if you kind of think about the world of inventing or bringing something to a place that doesn't know what it is, that's entrepreneurship at its core, right? It's like inventing something for people they didn't know they needed. And I really quite like that. I also love the slow burn romance that we have between the succubus and the orc, right? Like, it's such a slow burn romance, but you don't kind of sit there and go, oh my gosh, are they eventually gonna realize that they like each other? Can they just, know they like each other? I like that it takes time. Like, we see it really build up the genuine attraction, the genuine respect, the caring for each other. So by the time you get to when they finally, declare their feelings, or come to the actualization of their feeling, you're sitting there going, ah, like, I squeed. I was like, squee. They are actually finally realizing what they feel for each other. Um, and I love that. I love stories where we're not always forced to kind of see the signs of the romance right from the beginning, right? Because life isn't always like that. And I know the enemies to lovers trope is super popular these days, where if I the more you hate someone in the beginning, the more fiery the romance is. It works in some, kind of high stakes fantasy stories, or fiction stories. It works. But this is just so lovely. It feels like I felt like I was one of their friends. I felt like I was a regular at their coffee shop, and I checked in on their lives, saw what they were doing. I felt their pains. I helped them rebuild, and I just witnessed the loveliness of their lives. And the writing is easy. I don't know how else to describe, Travis Baldree's writing. It's easy. I know there's another book in this series called Bookshop and Bone Dust. I haven't had a chance to read it, but I have it. It's on my reading list for this month. Hopefully, I'll get to it in February. But I just think that when you're reading a book that doesn't feel like work, you don't have to think too hard to follow the structure of the narrative or the plot, right? It's straightforward, but it's inviting. It's, again, cozy. There's no other word for it. You know, I also kind of think of it as one of those all day in bed type reads. So I read this. I think I read, when did I read this? I read this when I was on holiday in Jamaica. Yeah, I read this in Jamaica. I'd literally got, I finished another book, and because I wanted January to be like a constant uh, moment of reading, I spent a couple of days in Jamaica, and my only mission was to read, sleep, sit by the beach, swim, read some more, drink drinks, and keep reading. And I started reading this in the morning. I think I'd had breakfast, so I'd had a cup of tea. I love tea. I had a cup of tea, had some toast, and I went down to the beach, and I kind of was sitting in one of those cabanas, and I opened it and started reading. And to be honest, I didn't realize how far the day had gone until I looked up to, I think I was trying to order a drink, and the beach was packed and the sun was literally about to set. I'd spent something like 10 hours just reading. And for me, that's the kind of reading this is, where you get comfortable, you have all the things that make you feel good and happy, and you just begin reading. And this is the kind of book that allows you to get lost in a world without it feeling exhausting, without it feeling high pressure. So I thoroughly enjoyed that about it. I also like the little things that we learn. Again, remember I said they kind of invented marketing, because Viv is like, I don't know how do you tell people about stuff. And our lovely succubus goes, I'm a do this, and she like does this amazing artwork and puts out the marketing campaign, but she also does their menu in this really lovely board. So I think Travis is like, took his favorite coffee shop, he spent so much time in, and thought, I wonder what it would be like if this place was built in a high fantasy world where these things don't technically exist. How would they come to the realization that they needed ventilation in the kitchen, so if they're baking, it's not too hot? How would they come to the realization that they need, music for entertainment? How will they come to the realization that they need specials? How will they come to the realization that they need this and that? I think that's kind of what he did. At least that's what I feel he did. And just the way they think about, okay, what can we do to make this happen? How do we build out something like this? So Legends and Latte, in my opinion, one of the best books I have read in a long, long time. It is unexpected. It is exciting. It's beautifully written. It's sweet, and it has magic, and it has pastries and amazing cups of coffee. Actually, when I was done with the book, I went and got a cup of coffee because I just hadn't had a cup of coffee in a long time, and I was like, this book makes me want to drink coffee again, because I don't drink coffee that much anymore. But this book made me want to have a nice latte, and a Danish. And I did when I put the book down. So if I were to give this book a score, this is a definite 9 out of 10 for me. And it's a 9 out of 10. I know that's a very, very high score, right? I give Paradox an 8.5. And I actually think that was generous, by the way, for Paradox. I'm rescinding my Paradox score. So my Atlas Paradox score, I'm gonna bring it down to an 8, right? But Legends and Latte, 9 out of 10, just because it made me feel good to read it. I enjoyed it. The It made me feel whole. It made me feel wholesome. I want to root for the characters. I don't struggle to like them. I enjoy getting to know them. They're little quirks, like this, a character being shy. I can be like, oh, but you can do it. I believe in you. So for me, I really like that. It also teaches us a lot about the power of friendship, and just how if we really, put it out in the world, how help will come um, from unexpected places to help us realize our dreams. And family can be created whether you have one or not. So for me, I really like that. I also love that they live in a world where sexuality is so fluid in their world. And I really also like that, where we're just not looking at these creatures, this high fantasy creatures from a singular lens. Because you think of orcs are creatures of war, they're creatures of fight and barbarian and bloodshed, right? We never think of them as sweet and kind and all of that. So I really love this book. So please go get yourself a copy of Legends and Latte. And I will see you next time on the book corner with Miss Atagana. Looking forward to our next chat. Thank you for listening to another episode of The Book Corner with me, Mish Atagana. Next week, we're going to go on another amazing adventure together, so I hope to see you there. Please don't forget to check out my quick reviews on Instagram and TikTok. I'm Globe Mish on Instagram, and I'm Mish Atagana on TikTok. See you soon.